Good afternoon and welcome to Moth News Live. Good afternoon. What's feeding back? Oh, that's my. See, I have my mic on here. What do I do? Just turn it off? Or just close it?
Turn the volume, turn the volume down on that one.
Oh yeah. This is live TV, folks. How's that now? Thanks, Tom. Thanks very much for that. Good afternoon and welcome to Moth News Live. It is 3:00. It's Friday, and we're live. That's what we do every Friday. As always, we're coming to you with a packed show from a secret bunker under a chip shop in Mullingar in County Westmeath. You'll never find us. You don't know which chip shop it is. There's at least several, maybe 5. We're breaking down the biggest stories of the week. We will be joined shortly by Labour councillor and trade unionist Ty Galvin. Ahead of St. Patrick's Day, talking about his journey from Cork to Brighton and beyond, with St. Patrick's Day on the horizon. It'd be interesting to get the thoughts of Tig, who's now working as a politician. He got into politics quite late in life. We'll get more on that in a little while, but just to get an outsider's view on Ireland. And also, he has strong links with the county and town of Cork and some of the goings on there with the trade unions and the Republican movement. So it'll be interesting to chat to Tig in just a little while. First, let's take a look at some of the big stories dominating the headlines. And folks, some of these are real jaw droppers. It's not good. I'm telling you, it's not good. You know, I've learned from writing news for Moth. You know, unfortunately, it's the bad news that brings the people, and then we're just going to have to get used to that. So let's look at Micheál Martin, who has met Trump. This is the big one. Micheál Martin's the latest European leader to visit US President Donald Trump during his second term in the White House. I mean, even saying that Donald Trump is back, you know, I think I'm still in shock. I think the world is still in shock. And meanwhile, he's getting up to all sorts of crazy stuff. The occasion was marked a markedly light-hearted occasion, a series of receptions and events ahead of St. Patrick's Day. It's the annual moment that it gives everyone a little bit, you know, a little bit of Irish pride. But it's the moment when Micheál Martin, the Taoiseach, the chief of Ireland, he holds court with Trump and hands over a bowl of Shamrock. And it was more banter. It was more banterful than diplomacy. Some of the let's look at some of the Taoiseach takeaways from the day's events when they met. Taoiseach takeaway number 1: the meeting did not and was not ever going to break out into a fight. I think Donald Trump loves to posture, doesn't he? He loves to give it the big one. But Martin joked about Trump's personal links to Ireland, referencing his golf resort in Doonbeg, saying, "I'd just like to say that the president that you have the distinction of being, I think, the only president that has physically invested in Ireland through your Doonbeg," he said. I don't know if this is a good thing, you know. Trump never wanted to shy away from flattery. He interjected. He said, "I love this guy. I love this guy. He probably loves this guy more than anyone he loves ever." As he pointed a thumb towards Martin, Trump went further, leaning into every Irish stereotype, telling the room, "I know so many Irish fighters. They like to fight, and they're damn good at it too." I mean, straight away, he's in with fighting Irish. He was just moments away from the drinking and the rest and the carousing. He then turned to Martin and said his father was a great fighter, actually. So that means genetically, I'm not going to mess around with you. You understand? I'm a believer in that. I don't think Trump is going to fight anybody, to be honest with you. I just don't think he has the. He does. The guy can barely move his feet, so I don't think it was ever going to break out into a fight. But you know, Donald, you know, that's how genetics work, and that's how diplomacy works. Yeah, so thankfully it didn't break out into a fight. Taoiseach takeaway number 2: someone should have punched this guy in the face for his socks alone. Trump's Vice President J.D. Vance turned up in full leprechaun chic, I'm calling it, wearing Shamrock socks and a green tie to mark the occasion, because of course nothing says international diplomacy like novelty socks. Taoiseach takeaway number 3: Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin, who are they? At one point, a journalist confronted Trump in the meeting room about some very notable absences from this year's St. Patrick's festivities, namely the Irish political party Sinn Féin, who boycotted the event over Trump's stance on Gaza. Who are they boycotting? Trump asked, genuinely baffled. When the journalist explained, Trump simply shrugged it off. "I haven't heard of that." We don't know whether he hasn't heard of Gaza, whether he hasn't heard of Sinn Féin, whether he knew they were boycotting, whether he just didn't understand what the person was talking. We know famously he can't read. Clearly, he can't understand words either. And possibly, let's give him a bit of credit. He was just not giving them the oxygen of any kind of. He just wasn't letting them have a moment. Sinn Féin, so he just brushed it off. Let's just say he did that. Taoiseach takeaway number 4. Micheál Martin seemed to throw a punch at the homeless in his own country. And here's where things got really dicey when Trump waded into Ireland's housing crisis, treating it like it was some kind of real estate success story. Asked for advice on solving Ireland's severe housing shortage, because that's the guy you want to ask about the housing crisis in Ireland is Donald Trump. We could all move into the golf resort in Doonbeg. Anybody that's looking for a gaff, just I'd say call up to the door there, they'll let you in. When he was asked about the housing shortage, Trump offered this. You know why they have a housing crisis? Because they're doing so well. They can't produce houses fast enough. That's a good problem, not a bad problem. A good problem. And unfortunately, our Taoiseach, our chieftain, Micheál Martin, shockingly seemed to welcome the response. He said, I don't know if many people picked up on this, but he said, yeah, that's a pretty good answer. No, Micheál, that's not a pretty good answer. It was a shitty, Trumpy answer. Here's what you could have said, Micheál, to that terrible answer from Trump. It's true that the economy is doing well, but we need to be doing the right thing by those less well off in our country. Simple. I mean, I know it's not exactly a radical statement, but it's something. A simple, non-confrontational response like that would have been just peachy. Would have been real nice, Micheál, if you said something like that, rather than just, acting like a 6-year-old, just agreeing with the bully in the corner. But no, Micheál, you had to play the fool. It was all about the crack. Oh, to catch me if you can. Follow the rainbow and you'll find my crock of shit about 10,000 houses that magically disappeared. He's more a leprechaun than a chieftain, if you ask me, folks. That's it for a roundup with the Taoiseach in America, as we call it, the America. And the next story, we don't have time for many stories with all the goings on in the US, but the other story we do need to talk about, and we will talk to Philip about in a little while. Our friends at The Ditch are reporting on what might be one of the worst scandals to hit children's health in Ireland in years. It's too bad to be true. You've heard of something that's too good to be true. This is too bad to be true, but actually it is. The staff in the hospital are alleging that needless hip surgeries have been carried out on children, and an external NHS consultant report backs that up, saying 80% of these surgeries on kids aged 1 to 7 were unnecessary. Even worse, this report was delivered to CHI in January and families still haven't been told anything. Health Minister Jennifer Carroll McNeill claims she hasn't seen the report, and now The Ditch has published it in full. You can go and look at it if you go to the Ditch website. You can go after our broadcast, obviously, or you can stay here. We'll be diving into this story more deeply after our chat with Ty, our guest, when our chief reporter Philip O'Connor joins us live to discuss that. Himself and Al will be joining us after our guest gets kicked out of the studio in just a little while. So stay tuned for that one, because folks, this is serious, operations on children that don't need to happen. What's that about? Money? Very hard to try and figure out. Anyway, if you have been impacted by anything we've spoken about today, or the CHI scandal, or if you have any thoughts on Martin's visit to Trump, do let us know at MOTH News on X or MOTH_news on Insta. We want to hear from you, or you can just contact us through a direct message here on the platform. Right, we have a guest live in studio. He moved from Cork to England as a young man, as a teenager, to work in as an electrician. His family have Republican and trade union roots in Cork. We're going to talk a little bit about Labour's rise and the fall of the Greens in the last elections. He's working on Ageing Well and Brighton Irish Society. He's worked with Ageing Well and Brighton Irish Society, and his thoughts on St. Patrick's Day and the handing over of the Shamrock and all that. Ty Galvin, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing? A Cork man. You're in exile since. Well, tell us, Ty. A Cork man. You moved over here to England, to the Brighton area. Are you
well,
here?
no, I first moved to Southampton. Really, I had an uncle there, a family there, and I finished my time in the shipyards there as an electrician. And then I moved on various places, worked around Europe, worked the length and breadth of Britain on the electrification of the railways. And I ended up in Brighton in 73,
73.
50 years ago.
I can
And
tell you that was the year I was born.
Yeah.
I look much younger, don't I?
Absolutely,
Yeah, thanks.
I would
Thanks for
have,
that.
I would have never thought you were
I
that
didn't want
old.
to. I thought you might have forgotten to say that.
Yeah.
So you left Ireland to work in the UK. We brought you on because St. Patrick's Day is only around the corner. We thought it might be good to get somebody on who is living outside of Ireland. I mean, you've got an incredibly interesting history and family history and heritage and connection with the city of Cork and the county of Cork and Ireland as a whole. But also just to kind of get your thoughts on, as a politician in the UK, what you think of what's happening in Ireland at the moment. So we will get to that. So you came predominantly for work. Was there nothing happening at home, or were you just?
Well, yeah, it was kind of where I was working in Cork. This was in the late 50s when things were not very good, and there was huge immigration, and I was part of that.
Part of that.
Yeah, and yes, it was, but there was no compulsion on me to leave, but we all left, I think, to think we could better ourselves. And I did. I've done really well. I'm not being boastful about that. To work in this country, and as you know, I'm now a Labour councillor in Brighton.
Yeah, Labour councillor in Brighton, and that's quite a. You've just got into politics late in life. When
I
did
was
this happen?
always on the periphery of it, as you said. I come from a strong. For instance, my great uncle was a guy by name Ty Galvin,
Let's grab that book actually.
who was a founder of the Irish Labour movement with James Connolly and Jim Larkin and the Countess Markovitz. And he campaigned from 1909 on. Actually, he was a founder of Sinn Féin in 1906 with Terence McSweeney. They were schoolmates together, came up in Cork together with McCurtain. And it's recognised that had he not been shot 3 weeks before the treaty was signed, that he would have been the next Lord Mayor of Cork. It's now recognised. He had already topped the poll there on all elections. So I come from that tradition, and I actually called after him. So even after his shooting, there were 250,000 people at his funeral in Dublin.
Yeah.
And of course, just 3 weeks to the day before the treaty was signed, and not many people know that Michael Collins actually broke off the treaty negotiations to go back for Tag's funeral. And I found, and it's in a documentary now, a 2-minute Pate News item of Ty Barry's funeral in Dublin. It's labelled The Patriot's Last Journey, as he went through O'Connell Street and headed for what was then Kingsbridge station before he was taken
Can we see
to
that there?
Cork.
I know this is very rudimentary now, DIY, but that's the funeral there, and that's your father and uncle, is it, at the front of the of the coffin?
Yeah.
So he was. I mean, this book is available, I presume, is it, by Donald?
Oh yes,
O'Driscoll?
it's only published about a little over a year ago by Donald O'Driscoll, who was the advisor on the wind that shakes the barley, of course, with Ken Loach.
Yeah.
And
Cillian Murphy.
And Cillian Murphy attended his classes at UCC.
Did he?
Yeah. Some of his history. Donald is a great history buff, as you know, and he's written several books on history of Ireland.
So this book is called Utter Disloyalist, Ty Barry and the Irish Revolution by Donald O'Driscoll, and is available it's in all decent bookshops, I'd say, or you can get it online anyway. But Ty Barry, your right saying your great uncle was the last high profile victim of the Crown forces during the Irish War of Independence. He was a veteran Republican, trade unionist, journalist, poet, GA official. He had plenty of energy anyway, and he was an alderman in the Cork Corporation.
And he wrote the first book on hurling, the first instructional book in around 1916 called Hurling and How to Play It, I did give a copy.
You should have given. You didn't give that to any of the Cork players, no. They
They
may go back and go back and have a look at that book now.
I
I
think
think that book must end up in Kilkenny, did it?
I think I don't know, but it was taking a long time to get one back, aren't we?
So he wrote a book on the sort of the first instructional book on hurling as well.
And some of the books that you'll find now in Crook, I gave a copy of the Crook. Some of the instructional books today, you'll still find some of his words that are featured on how to lift and strike and all that type of thing. Yeah, it's a very he was a big man in the GA. Yeah, very big.
He inverted,
and he started a camogie team for Yon Lee, the second camogie team in the country.
Oh wow, okay. So he was a champion of women's sports as well.
And he brought women into the social scene. You know, yeah.
Did he?
Actually, he was one of the nominators of the Countess Markovitz for the 1918 election.
Right. Okay. Wow. So he was a champion of women as well.
Oh, very much so.
So he very much. I mean, this is not he's not a name that I would have come across or I'm very interested now, and I will. I'll hyper focus on this man for a few months.
As O'Driscoll said, he died about 3. Collins was at his funeral about 15, 17 days in Dublin. I believe he did meet over there at that time. He wouldn't have come back to Ireland during these negotiations and not talked to Dev. And the treaty, of course, came, and then the Civil War happened. And as O'Driscoll said, he was kind of lost in the smoke. He should have been raised to hero mark.
Yeah.
He should have been lost in. He was lost in the smoke.
So there's so much going on at the time that it sort of got there was too much news almost at the time that he was kind of a little bit forgotten in the
And when he was actually, I believe he was taken out in Ballykinler camp. He was shot while waving goodbye. The camp, the treaty was going on. There were 2,000 of Collins's men in Ballykinler camp. Sean Lemass was there, Father Carney, who wrote the Soldier Song. And they were due to be released. It was agreed. Actually, the 8 of them lost their lives. They shot 2 guys with 1 bullet. I think one of them they were from Leitrim. They were comparing notes from home, letters, and they were due. Ty Barry was due. There was a release going on. Collins and the treaty negotiations said that we can't negotiate while you're virtually holding 2,000 people hostages. It was agreed that they would be released on parole and that they would return after if anything didn't come of it. So they were on the process of being released, and at the time, as there were lorry loads going out every day, and Ty Barry was due to go out the following day, and they were waving goodbye to guys who were leaving, and Sentry put a bullet in him.
And any idea why, or
well, no,
was it orders or was it just a
well? There were, of course, there was an inquiry, and then of course the treaty happened, and the people that were at the camp was open. The gates of the camp were throwing open freely, and there was an inquiry, and of course, as usual, the usual whitewash happened. The Sentry wasn't brought, and then.
Miscommunication or something. The guy who shot them wasn't brought to justice, or he wasn't made to speak about what happened or give evidence or whatever.
I believe that he was so prominent. You see, they were determined that they were always throwing him in jail. Actually, it's quite a very humorous situation where when he was speaking in Cork City Hall one time, and he was really big by this time. Him and McSweeney, they were really pushing him, because they were really pushing it. And of course, they sent down a guy from Belfast to spy on him. And he was at the back of the City Hall. And he was noticed by the people there. It was packed then, and they were going to throw him out in his head. And Ty Barry said, no, leave him alone. He's just doing his job. And he was arrested for making seditious speeches. And of course, at his trial in the court, the guy whose life he virtually saved was the chief witness against him.
Against him, right?
Yeah, and in his spiel, he said, and of course, by this time, Sinn Féin were well organised. They had solicitors and lawyers and everything defending Tig. And of course, the judge questioned this guy, and he got stammered, and he got all flustered. And the judge said to him, "Can you please explain what's happened there?" He said, "You've been contradicted." Oh, he said, Your Honour, he said, I'm sorry, he said, my shorthand only runs to 150 words a minute. And he was speaking at 250 words a minute, and I had difficulty with the Cork accent. But they threw him in jail anyway.
Fair enough. So yeah, and that was, and he never got out really.
But not virtually. He got out that time, but then eventually they arrested him in the court. After they burned Cork to the ground, they were having council meetings. He was an alderman of Cork City at this time. And they were having council meetings in the courthouse. And the Tans and the British Army, I hate distinguishing the Tans and the British Army, they went in and arrested 11 of them, took them by boat, and they took people from Cork and Waterford and Kerry, and they took them all on this boat to Belfast and eventually to Ballykinlough.
There you go. You could read all about it. Utter Disloyalist, Ty Galvin, The Irish Revolution by Donald O'Driscoll. Fascinating stuff. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's so many stories that are emerging from that time, and it's great to see that they're not getting lost in, as you said, lost in the smoke. What would you make of Ireland today as someone who's so close to that sort of a revolutionary time when we wanted something better for our countrymen? And where do you think we're at? And are we getting to where? I mean, there's that people say, you know, is this what they died for? You know, that great phrase, which is well worn and probably oversaid. But like, where do you think Ireland is? And do you think somebody like Ty Galvin will be proud of what we're doing?
Well, I think there's been great progress made in Ireland, especially since we joined the European Union. It's created a lot of benefits for Ireland. But I'm quite amazed that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are joined up as a government, because I think I think the diaspora and people I know here are equally amazed. And I think there's a very cheap shot at trying to remain in power or to keep Sinn Féin out. Ireland needs change, and they're not bringing that change about. I think the change that Ireland requires, I think, can only be achieved by Sinn Féin. So it's difficult to understand how these parties who fought tooth and nail and the bloodshed by both sides,
yeah,
that they suddenly, when they see their grip and power likely to fade or being challenged, that they join together so they can keep that power. I mean, people know this. People, the diaspora know it big time.
So you're saying people living in England are looking at this going, this is disingenuous.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
As I said, it's just
it's a power grab rather than
grab. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so you would say that it's not something that they're thinking, well, this would really benefit the country if we keep Sinn Féin out, if we come together. It's an unusual thing. I sometimes think in Ireland we're too close to the situation to see what's actually happening. But for somebody like you who left in '73, very close to that period of revolution and the War of Independence and all that, sort of still in family and probably in your mind, and then to see that happening, it must feel it must jar, you know. And the way they bring the troubles in when Sinn Féin are talking, and they're connecting them to murder and all this kind of stuff, but they're not that far removed from it themselves, you know.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And we haven't got time to go into the stories today, but we know it. But they're not far removed. And by the way, I came to Brighton in '73. I came to England in about 59, 60. Yeah. So it's quite. It's not difficult to understand. You understand that these people need to be in power and have their tents at Galway races, spending the taxpayers'
brown envelopes
money,
and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And they have great difficulty. These people have great difficulty and worry very much if there's any sign of them not being in power. It's a shame that they can't be doing it, be there as a more of a socialist attitude, where they can do away with poverty, the poverty that exists in Ireland, that we all know exists, and the housing situation. They don't seem to be making inroads into that, not even trying, in my opinion, as I see it from here. Now, obviously, I could be wrong. I'm not sitting reading the Irish Independent every day.
But you're pretty right. But also, I mean, you're working in Brighton as a councillor. You're involved in in housing and development, and I know you're involved in the Children's Hospital or the hospital as well. So what have you learned, like as an Irishman coming over or ending up in Brighton, working as a councillor? I mean, since what, since the age of 83 or whatever, what have you brought from your years of working, from the history, from your connection with from obviously you've got a wealth of knowledge when it comes to your history. What are you bringing to the people of Brighton when it comes to development and social conscience?
It's quite funny because, well, not funny. I was involved. I spoke on adult social care. I spoke in the House of Commons in committee on the adult social care, and I was involved. And in a couple of years ago, when local elections were coming up in my local Labour branch, they said, "Why don't you go up?" And I said, "I'm too old." And they put me up anyway, and I nearly topped the poll. And it's amazing when we were on the knocker around Brighton, the amount of Irish, born Irish, and as a matter of fact, I'll tell you a quick story. I was on the knocker, and you know this with Kilkenny descent and hurling, and this woman answered, and we heard one another's accents, and she said, "Well, I come from Middleton." Well, I said, "I actually had one game with a guy, one of the greatest hurlers ever, a guy called Christy Ring."
Christy Ring, huh?
And she said, "Well, I'm his niece."
No way.
And this is on the doorstep in Brighton.
So you were going around door to door, and you came across someone and said, "I'm Christy Ring's niece."
Yeah.
That's
So
unbelievable.
totally by accident.
For anybody who doesn't know Christy Ring, I mean, he's right up there. He's almost as good as Eddie Carr. But I mean, you've got Christy Ring, you got Jimmy Barry Murphy.
And I was in Cork Park in 1954, one of the best attended finals ever, when Christy Ring got his 8th medal against Wexford, and all the great hurlers that Wexford had, and the Rackards and
the Rackards, yeah.
And I was 14, and I hung off the barrier, and there was over 100,000 people in Croke Park that day. As a matter of fact, we failed to go in 16. I was with an uncle, my dad wasn't well, and my cousin, Pat Goggin. We were both the same age, 14. And we paid to go into Hill 16, and we were with two big strong men, and we were strong young fellas, and we couldn't even push through the crowd in Hill 16. So they decided to go around to the canal end. This is before the match started. And as we got around Croke Park, every gate in Croke Park was open. We walked into the canal end, and I remember the crowd still coming up from Dublin to the match. And we got into the canal end, hung off a barrier, and saw the whole game, every puck of the ball. And the official attendance was 85,000, and there must have been another 20,000 in there that day. Couldn't move. Yeah, amazing.
Crazy. Yeah. Different times, though. Different times.
Different time, yeah.
You wouldn't get that now. You can get that now in Brighton and at the football. So and we haven't even touched on the fact that you came over and ended up playing for football for Dagenham. Was it Dagenham and Redbridge at the time?
No, it was Dagenham. I was working in Dagenham. I went up there. I used to keep myself fit training, and I had a bit of a run out with Cork Hibs as a youth, and I played quite a bit around Cork, you know, and I went up and I was with Dagenham, and actually that's where they exchanged my name from Ty to Ty, because I spent my name TADG, and guys, they were calling me Det, they were calling me all sorts of stuff, and the guy were picking the five-a-sides one night, and I was at the back and he said, I'd pick Ty, and he put TY up, and I said, that'll do. I was fed up with training every time.
So it's Ty forevermore.
Well, yeah.
To the locals, to the people around you. Well, look, I mean, I feel like I could have talked to you forever. There is a man, a Cork man, waiting on the line, Al. He might want to jump in and ask an Al question, or even just say hello to one of a Cork man in exile. Can we bring Al in there? And I'm putting him on the spot now. He's not there, is he not? He must be late. Philip's there though. Philip, you've been listening, I'm sure, to Ty. Is there anything you'd like to say to him, or just you can just say it's a pleasure to be in your presence, sir?
It literally is. from the wonderful town of Brighton as well, which is, I was there a couple of years ago for the Women's Euros, a fantastic place. And I think we probably would have gotten rid of the British out of Ireland if we just sent all our Cork footballers over to the main island, so to speak, back in the day.
Yeah, we should have done that. Listen, Ty, it's been great talking to you. But Philip said we should have just sent all our Cork hurlers over to what was, I can't even remember what you said.
I can't. Did you?
Yeah,
I couldn't hear.
Something about sending all the Cork hurlers. Well, you see, I think a lot of them left, and that's why Kilkenny had so many wonderful years in hurling. Ty, it's lovely. Thanks very much for joining us. And this is a great book, and people keep a look out for it. It's fantastic if you want to learn a bit more about your history and what happened around the War of Independence. And Ty, good luck with the work as well in Brighton, and keep up the great work.
Thank you very much, Keith. I hope I gave you a decent.
Oh, fascinating! Yeah, fascinating. I think it was great just because, you know, with St. Patrick's Day on the horizon, that we talked to somebody, one of our G-Sport, or, you know, a man in exile, let's just say, across the water, and get your take on things. And I thought it was very interesting, and an interesting man as well, and like utterly steeped in history as well.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Have a great day.
Great to be here.
Thanks, Philip. How are you doing?
I'm tipping away here. I very much enjoyed listening to Ty talking about his history in England, because, like I say, this is one of those times of the year when you think about the Irish abroad, you know, and people like Ty, and there are plenty of them in England, as you well know, who went through that, working in the factories, working on the building sites, so many great songs and plays and stories about it. But it's to actually see people of his generation in particular, because he mentioned in his remarks to you there that, you know, he wasn't necessarily forced to go, but there wasn't really a whole lot left from him, and then he made the way over there. And I think many men like him who went over, and women too, maybe didn't see this they were going to do for their entire lives, and yet there he is at 83, still spry, involved in politics, and still trying to do the best for his local community. And the only thing I would say around St. Patrick's Day is that if you can't be back doing it for your community in Cork or Kildare or Dublin, you can certainly contribute to the community wherever you round up in the world. And there are, what is it, 70 million people of Irish heritage around the world, all making that kind of contribution.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I spoke to a young man during the week. If you want to look back on this, I had a conversation with a fella. His name briefly escapes me at the moment.
It's up on social media. Was it Kieran?
Yeah, Kieran Nugent. Thank you very much for getting me out of a hole once again, Philip. I talked to Kieran Nugent about the whole. He did some research with the people he works for about the widening gap between the high earners in Ireland and the squeezed middle, as we call them, or the younger people trying to sort of trying to start out in life. And we were talking about, like, you know, the cost of housing, I mean, the lack of housing, but also the cost of rent, and the fact that, you know, the big lie told to people was that it was austerity that was going to get us out of the issues that we had. And we were kind of sold a lie, really. It wasn't really austerity that got us out of it. But you can watch back and have a look at that. But he talks about people leaving Ireland to look for work, and how that's kind of played off in the media. And it's kind of like it's almost like the way it's explained is like, well, yeah, people just they kind of want to leave, and that's better, and people like to travel, and that's, you know, just the Irish, we just like travel. But actually, the fact of the matter is that, you know, you can't really at the moment in Ireland, and we know this for a fact, you can't go to university and have as Kieran said, can't have an old job at the weekend and pay your rent, you know, and have a few beers and be a student. You know, you need to take a loan out. You need somebody to, you know, a benefactor. You need parents to pay your rent. You need, you know, you and I, when we went to college, you know, we had a few quid. We did a job on a Saturday or Sunday, and that's what got us through college, and that pretty much paid for everything, and maybe a bit of a grant as well. Those days are gone, and people are leaving the country. And you know, we look back at Ty's time. You know, he talks about the 50s and having to leave or wanting to leave to better themselves. And you know, you wonder, like, how much progress have we made? You know.
I think that's the big problem that Ireland has, in that you take. Now, I always object to this, the best of the brightest, because there are brilliant people who stay at home in Ireland as well. But it's absolutely undeniable that many of our great people do live abroad. And if you just look at the ministers who are going out there, to Australia, to America, and to Africa, and to European cities, and they are meeting people who are involved in tech, they're involved in food, they're involved in tourism, they're involved in all sorts of businesses, and often very high up there. And you often think, what kind of a country would we have if we've been able to keep those people at home? But unfortunately, we've done that thing of voting the same way every single election since the foundation of the state, and it just hasn't delivered what we've needed, especially not in our lifetime. Because back in the day, they would have built social housing. They did the best they could in the 70s and the 80s to create jobs. And then the fruits of that were seen in the 90s and then ended up in the Tiger. But to see the country crash in 2008 and see property go through the floor, and now see the same mistakes being made again. Like, it's absolutely dreadful. And now we're at the extent, we're in a situation whereby you have students abroad, and they're saying, I don't want to go back to Ireland now. Here in Vienna or in Berlin or in Stockholm, I can have my own. I don't have to share with others. I don't have to live with my parents. My college is a 15-minute, 20-minute, 30-minute commute away, rather than an hour or 2 hours, or living in Carlow and getting to Dublin every day. So I think at some point again, we've spoken about a lot at the very beginning on MOTH news. We need to decide what kind of Ireland we want, and then we have to go vote for it. Because as I was saying, change is not going to come through the people who created this situation. They're ideologically capable of solving the problems that they themselves have created. So we really have the courage to try something different, and to try something new, and to understand the pain that's going to come with that until we solve those problems. Because if we don't, we're going to continue these cycles of boom and bust. A little bit of immigration and then a whole load of immigration. And as a result, there's not a lot of people who celebrate St. Patrick's Day, knowing that their grandchildren are parade in Sydney and not in Limerick, Cork, or in Dublin on Monday.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. What did you think of? I spoke earlier about Micheál Martin's performance with Donald Trump, and the remark that a housing crisis is a good thing. It means Ireland is doing well. And Micheál Martin's response, rather than saying, well, look, we could be doing better or something, non-confrontational. He didn't have to make a big song and dance about it, but to say, oh, that's a great answer. I thought that was a bit, I thought that was a bit mean, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where he's going in there, he doesn't want to upset anybody. The whole thing was through that half an hour without pissing off and all. But as the saying goes, communication is as bad as heard. And people listening to Micheál Martin saying those words, and they're scrolling on their phone, and they're seeing the MOTH socials, and they're seeing things in the journal, and they see that, and they're living in a car. Or the kids are living with them in a hotel room. So I think you have to have that sense. You have to conscious the whole time of who you're talking to and who's listening to you. And I think even if you said, look, thanks very much, Mr. President, we have our difficulties, we're doing our best to get through them. What you're saying there is you're not talking to Donald Trump. You're talking to your audience home and saying, we see you, we're aware of that problem. But they're not. It's not them. He's not staying in his car tonight outside the house. He's driving back down to Cork, he's coming home, dropping maybe business or whatever it is. And it doesn't happen to Micheál Martin or to people that he knows. Therefore, it's really easy to ignore. He doesn't know any of the international protection seekers who are living in tents in Dublin and in other cities in Ireland. Why would it bother him that much? And I think it's very telling, but at the same time, it's not like we didn't know who he is already. We know they don't take it. We know they don't care. We know that they want to solve that problem because they've been telling us that for years. And that to go back to Guy's point, is why we need to change how we're doing things.
Yeah, I might just bring Al in there. He's joined us. We'll find out which country he's in and where he's coming from. I believe there's a bit of an echo there on the line, but we'll do our best. Al, where in the world are you, Al? And welcome.
I've just arrived in the UK. Sorry, guys, we got an echo.
We do have a bit of an echo. Yeah, we're not sure why. We're just going to have to persevere, as it were. But sure, look, you love the sound of your own voice, Al. It's a cheap shot. But I had to take it. Al, we were just briefly talking there about Micheál Martin's performance with Trump Any takeaways? Any thoughts? We were talking about his response to, Trump saying that it's a good sign if you got a home, a housing crisis, and he didn't really he didn't say the right thing. He was a bit, he's a bit like the bold child who's sort of licking the arse of the bully kind of in the classroom, sort of in his response. What were your thoughts of his performance generally, and what are you seeing then more broadly in how Ireland is being talked about, especially around this time of the year?
Have you ever seen that movie? Is it called Idiocy or Idiocracy? Do you remember? Have you ever seen that? Where the guy Wilson rocks up into the government, and it's like he did an IQ test, and he's the smartest guy in the country, and the minister for defense is like, "Yeah, I won a prize. So I'm the minister for defense."
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think the people involved in this charade all won prizes to get there? Is that what you're trying to say?
I said it from the beginning that I think Micheál Martin's going to be returning with more than a bucket of shamrock from this trip. So I think there isn't too many four-leaf clovers going on over there. So I think the subtlety is Trump is, he's not hanging around. He's executing his plan to the letter. He's pulling the US companies back into the States. He's going to impose tariffs on any company outside the US. He means business. And he threw a couple of, I think the more subtle one than the housing is obviously that's, a blanket kind of, you're not doing a good job, is my read on it. That's my theory. But the other two subtle ones were, you guys are very smart in Ireland. You managed to take our pharmaceutical companies away from our tax, and the tech companies. That was a very, very subtle one. I think the other one was his most popular guy. The most popular person that he spoke of is Conor McGregor, who obviously is very well known as not popular with government circles, right? Never mind the civil case that is like widely discussed globally. So, I mean, it puts us into a box. We're pigeonholed into a category of what I've been saying for quite some time in terms of, the shine is very much coming off the leprechaun right at the moment, and it's down to, how we're doing. But one thing, guys, I was in the US for the last week, right? And one thing that we're not getting here is that there's a lot of social media coverage. Okay, right. I'll try and dig it out again, but the way the algorithms work, it's on location and geostamp. There was a lot of footage around Ireland, and US tourists and Canadian tourists and other tourists sharing what's happened to Ireland, what is wrong in Ireland, look at this in Ireland, and they're sharing footage of the condition of the streets. There was one town shared. I wasn't sure where it was. It was rural. I'm thinking it was Tipperary, to be honest, right? Or maybe Wexford or something. I'm not sure. But it was literally, they just recorded like lots of young males walking down the street dressed in black and chanting, right? And they said, this is what we paid for in Ireland. And one of the headlines was 25% is down by 25% or down to 25% or something, decrease of tourism in Ireland right now. And this is why. Mm-hmm. And then I know there was another guy who's an Irish, I guess he's an expat in Australia. He's quite very well ranked in terms of an influencer, and he's sharing a lot of content around, okay, you're giving us a hard time, this is why we're leaving. And he's showing footage of the Irish in Australia, in bars together, in clubs together. They went to see Kneecap, and he's showing the content of saying, this is the Irish youth versus miserable in Ireland, going to bed after work, not being able to pay for anything, not be able to. So they're describing it as a mass displacement of the youth, right? And this isn't my narrative. This is the youth speaking, right? And we have to listen to them, right? They're saying, I'm leaving. I can't afford a house. I'm leaving. I can't afford a car. I can't afford to insure the car. I'm sick of the government. I'm sick of what you guys have done to the country, and I'm out of here. And look, guys, we're all young enough to know the 80s and 90s when when we were all saying that. It happened, right? I mean, like, one thing I must say about the Irish in terms of patriotic is that when we say something and mean it, we do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like when an Irish person says, "I'm fucking leaving," they're leaving. They're not thinking about leaving. They've already booked their flight and they're fucking out of there. Like, you know, whatever you say about us, good, bad, or indifferent, if you say we're doing something, we do it right or wrongly. So like when the Irish youth are saying we're leaving in our masses, they have already booked their fucking tickets and they've got their bed sorted out to sleep with some other Irish person. Because, you know, I've always maintained that, you know, and I've said this from a very young age, we're absolutely beautiful to each other when we're out of Ireland. You can go to any country in the world, and if you're in a difficult position, if you meet a fellow Irish person, no matter where you're from, background, culture, you're in. They look after you. Done.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Done.
Yeah. I had my
Except
own.
in Ireland.
Say, what are you doing here? What are you doing? What are you doing at my door? I'm your neighbour. But I witnessed it myself. I went to Australia. I did the whole thing in the 90s, and I went to Australia, New Zealand. I went to South America, Mexico, and everywhere there was an Irish person, and you just stay in their house, and there'd be no questions asked, and they'd feed you, and those people weren't ever coming back, so they were probably just happy to put up you for a couple of weeks, but and get a sort of a taste of home for a little while. But that's absolutely true, and you know, I think it's just not it doesn't feel like a great place to be at the moment. Would you agree, Philip? I mean, I know we'll get on to the stuff in the hospital in a moment, but have you any other thoughts to add to that?
You know, I think it's a very valid point that both you make, lads, because I've been over here in Sweden for the last 25 years and I work an awful lot with the Swedish-Irish community. And even before we went on air, we're going to tell people how the sausage is made here. I was saying to Keith that I have to be out of here at the top of the hour because I'm actually getting a train from Stockholm to Gothenburg because they're having their first ever St. Patrick's Day parade in Gothenburg tomorrow. And it's going to be brilliant because it's people I haven't seen.
St. Patrick, are you?
Yes.
No, I've done that in Stockholm, I have to admit. I hope those photographs never come out, you know. But I'm going to get down there and I'm actually going to do a little podcast for the local community and do a little bit of filming for YouTube. And it is people, and they're exactly the people Alan is talking about. They're everything from fellas who work in purchasing for the local council to a man who owns a couple of pubs to a fella who sings in those pubs to, you know, the guys that coach the local rugby team and that. And if anything ever happens over here, a couple of years ago, one of our friends passed away very suddenly just down the coast from Gothenburg in a place called Vorberg. His name was Kevin Higgins, one of the best guys you'll ever meet. And the way that the whole community gathered around to help Kevin and his family at that time, and we've contacted his family, his partner and their children to say, come to the parade tomorrow, we want to see you, because we don't want them to lose contact with that Irish community. And I think that's the kind of thing that back home is not really encouraged anymore because, you know, in rural Ireland during the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, that, you know, everybody had to help everybody else because you simply couldn't go hiring in labourers to bring in the turf for the harvest or that. So I would turn up and help Alan. I would turn up and help Keith. And the day it was my turn to harvest in my field, you would turn up and help me. And there was none of this, oh, you owe me a tenner, you owe me a fiver. We did the work and we looked after one another and we didn't count the cost. But then, you know, if I found that, you know, Alan was talking about me behind my back or that he wasn't pulling his weight on your farm, Keith, then that was where it all fell apart. But that created a brilliant sense of community that really only is in evidence abroad. Now, obviously you'll find it in certain communities, in certain places, but it is the kind of thing that made us so brilliant to begin with. You know, the Irish word clan, the Irish word for family, has made it into the English language and made it all over the world because of those bonds that we create between one another. And maybe if that's the message of this St. Patrick's Day, the thing we should be thinking of is why can't we come together instead of just one day a year? Why can't we do it the other 364 days a year and build something better together as well? Because it will be a great celebration on Monday. I don't know, Al, if you'll be back in Ireland for it now on Monday. I hope you will, or you either, Keith, if you're going to be in Dublin.
Unfortunately, I'm traveling, Phil, actually. Unfortunately.
Business gets in the way.
Once the snakes leave, they don't let us back in.
That's very true. Although Micheál Martin got back in, so you know there must be a back door there somewhere.
He got into the door.
How is our credit with the solicitors there, Al? Are we still all right with them?
I think it's just
we batted that guy off. We beat him off. He's gone.
He's gone. That's it. That's good. We're back down to plus minus zero again.
We got rid of the guy that. We got rid of the guy that gave us the defamation case for telling the truth. So I think he's we've been more vindicated on that one.
I thought we were going to stop talking about beating lads off.
No.
enjoy enjoy your St. Patrick's Day wherever you are, and I'm sure there'll be you'll be drowned in the Shamrock or whatever it is that people do these days. And I have to say, Philip, I think you'd make a fantastic St. Patrick. You know, just stick the owl hat on, and like you're a shoo-in. You're a direct descendant, either him or Niall of the Nine Hostages.
Yeah, exactly. I do tend to look like I've been chained to a radiator for about the last 9 months or so. All right, so that might be the role I'll have to take on Monday. You know,
Different hostage you're thinking of. So listen, from the sublime to the absolutely insane. I mean, I said it during my news roundup that this story is, you know, you've heard of things being too good to be true. This is too bad to be true, Philip. The Ditch have been reporting and doing the research into this story. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about it, about what's going on with children and operations that shouldn't be happening?
Yeah, so basically what happened was that a whistleblower within Children's Hospitals Ireland, now that covers the Crumlin Hospital, Temple Street Hospital and Kappa Hospital, and they had an idea that there was so many hip operations being done on children between the ages of 1 and 7, and they were going, is this actually necessary, right? And so the Ditch started to dig into it, and they managed to get hold of a report that was done. When this whistleblower said to Children's Hospitals Ireland, I don't think this is right, an NHS consultant was commissioned to do a report about it. And what that report found, lads, was that let me see now if I can pronounce this correctly. The operation in question is called an osteotomy, and it's to do with cutting bones basically to make them fit properly. So if you have a problem, as many small children do, I think one of my children had it in the beginning of her life, with your hip bones and that kind of thing. If the ball and socket joint that's there isn't properly formed, so if the socket isn't sort of properly formed, there's a risk that you're going to dislocate your hip. Sometimes there's loads of different kinds of treatments for it. Not all of them are surgeries, but there are surgeries available. So what happened was, it seems that there's a new surgical procedure available, and that's what's being used in Irish hospitals at the moment. But again, this whistleblower suspected there were so many procedures being done that, you know, were these actually medically warranted? So when this NHS consultant came in, they found that in Crumlin Hospital, 98% of the operations that were carried out did meet the threshold. And that means that there was examinations and there was x-rays and there was all sorts of diagnoses made. 98% of the children in Crumlin Hospital absolutely should have had that operation. But in Kappa Hospital, in Temple Street Hospital, 60% was the number. So 40% arguably did not need a surgical intervention. And at Kappa Hospital, 79% of those surgeries did not meet the requirements for that operation, according to this NHS consultant that was brought in. Now, there's never an operation you want to do, be it on a young person, old fogies like us, or anybody else in between. Any sort of surgical procedures you carry out always carries with it a risk. And the other thing about these operations is, because you're doing them on very young people, they have to grow into their bodies, right? And one of the things that's cropped up, I was saying to Keith last night, I was reading this report, my jaw on the floor around about midnight last night. But the big part of it now is, because this is a new procedure, there's no sort of, the road hasn't been traveled yet, right? We don't know what the roadmap is. And they're also worried about the follow-up here. So you reach what's called skeletal maturity around the age of 16 to 18, and you have to sort of follow this all the way through just to make sure that this thing was successful. So the whistleblower wasn't only concerned about the fact that these procedures were being carried out when maybe they didn't need to, but also that the follow-ups that really need to happen in these situations to make sure that was the correct thing to do apparently have not been happening. And probably the biggest problem that I think we all have with all of this is the absolute silence from Children's Hospitals Ireland, who got this report back in January, I believe, and it's been sitting on their desk ever since. And what that says to me, without them ever having said anything, is they think they know how serious this is, but they're trying to find a way of communicating around this that makes it not look as bad. And that, to me, when you're in that situation where you're trying to do things like that, then you're telling people that you've got something to hide.
Well, thankfully, it's been on every front page of all the legacy media papers, right? Like, thankfully, they've been covering it in depthly.
I wish I could say that, Al. But as often happens with
your sarcasm again there, Al.
Yeah, just a hint. I mean, this
is the thing. So the unfortunate thing about it is, as we well know, we've been in this business quite some time together, and we've all been around the house before. And there seems to be a thing with the ditch where when the ditch publishes something, and it's literally the dogs in the street are talking about it, but it never seems to make the headlines in sort of major papers, or never seems to make the headlines in RTE or that kind of thing. It's almost like the journalists who work for the ditch aren't trusted because of, who funds it, and all these things are always thrown at them. Whereas if you actually look, and again, to tell people how the sausage is made, we started talking about this story privately between the three of us and the rest of the team here at MOTH News, and we went through it, and we've gone through the documentation, and we've gone through the reporting that the ditch has already gone through and confirmed, and we've double checked all that. That's what I spent all last night and all of this morning doing, so we can bring this to you without fear or favor. We know that this is a genuine document. This is a genuine report into a genuine situation, and we know that those statistics are correct. And yet you have a situation where people with far bigger media muscles than what we have haven't written a word about it so far.
Could I play devil's advocate? Sorry, Al. Could I play devil's advocate? Is there any reason why they might say? I mean, you hear excuses for other stories not being published. We've heard, this is an ongoing case. We can't report on it because it's in the courts, or blah 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 blah. This isn't public knowledge. This has been leaked. We can't talk about it. We've seen mainstream media, publish stuff that's been leaked by Taoiseachs and Taoiseachs and all sorts. So what possibly could their excuse be? And maybe there's not, but I'm just trying to give them the benefit of the doubt here.
Well, you know what, Keith? I went through this with a fine-tooth comb, right? Because I have a very finely tuned radar for when it comes to, libel and defamation and all these kinds of things. And I also sort of, I learned an awful lot about journalism from a man called Peter Stark back in the day, a Finnish-Swedish reporter. And Peter passed away many years ago, but I have him in my ear every time I look at a story. And I could hear him whispering last night, find why they won't publish it. And I could not find it, right? Everything, all the data in the report that I've seen is it's anonymous, right? So you can't say, you're going to reveal the identity of this children or this child or this scourge of life. Yeah. So it's all above board. I mean, I have to say it's exemplary reporting by the ditch, and they deserve great credit for that. But I do think that we have to ask, and again, we've spoken about that on this show before. Sometimes these things don't make it there because something in somebody's, way back in the back of their mind goes, okay, let's not say anything about this yet. Let's wait on Children's Hospital Ireland to come out. But again, on the flip side of the coin, if it was something else entirely that maybe did fit the narrative of the major media houses, it would be straight out there on the front page, and they probably wouldn't even call somebody for comment. I was actually only looking at the comedian Ty Galvin there put out a video this afternoon, and he was saying all the articles that have been written about him and his pro-Palestine stance, and nobody's ever picked up the phone to talk to him about it, which is, if I write anything about Alan...
We all have experience about that, right? I mean...
Well, that's it. But if I write anything about Alan, the very last thing I have to do, and one of the only things that I need to do, is I need to offer him the right to reply. If I'm going to accuse him of anything or say anything about him, I need to offer him the chance to meet those allegations or accusations or whatever else, and it does not happen, right? Now, the Children's Hospital of Ireland, they can say no comment. I sent questions to Spotify during the week. They didn't respond. It makes it very hard for me to do my story if they don't respond, but I'm going to try and do it anyway. But you can still report if those things are out there, and they are now out in the open. The ditch has done this and done a great service to both the children of Ireland and the media consumers of Ireland doing this. And it's really time that the rest, never mind the ditch, it's really time that the rest got off the fence and started doing what it is they're supposed to be doing.
Exactly. Philip, just the question I have is, setting that aside for a second, that behind those statistics, there's families and there's people, there's real life people, there's children, right? The question, I just, why? What is the actual agenda to doing this? It's like unnecessary surgery, cover up. I mean,
worst case scenario, are we saying it was just a big mistake?
What?
Well, I'll tell you the worst case scenario now, Keith, and that is something that was brought up by the whistleblower. And I think this person, if I remember rightly, I don't have the notes in front of me right now, they're on the other computer. I think this person made a protected disclosure. So this is part of an ongoing process. And that person said, and this is the worst case scenario, is that they worry that the motivation may be financial because each of these surgeries costs 1,600 euros. Okay. And if that is the case, we have a very, very serious problem with the health service in Ireland because, and again, correlation and causation are not the same thing. But if surgeries are being carried out because it's an easy 1,600 quid for somebody somewhere in the system or an insurance company or whatever else it might happen to be, a clinic somewhere, and again, we're not alleging that at all, but this is something that a whistleblower said in a protected disclosure, right? We have to be able to ask this question. If that is the case, we're in a very, very serious spot, because it's a similar thing to going to your dentist and your dentist saying, oh no, you have a hole in this tooth, you have a hole in that tooth. Now just let me reef them out, right? And, you know, maybe for elfers like us, it may not be too bad. But, you know, these children that we're talking about, all of the children referred to in the report were between the ages of 1 and 7 when they had these surgeries, right? As Alan correctly points out, families. We know the situation Irish families are in. There's not too many Irish families who have the money, who have the energy, who have the emotional support networks. When we know the situation with housing and that kind of thing, what are you sending a child home to after these things? And that's why these things are so important, that they are brought out into, you know, the disinfectant of sunlight, so we can talk about these things and see why they're being done, and why they're being done despite the fact that, you know, maybe they weren't motivated in the first place.
This is a huge scandal, and I'm sure we'll talk about it again, Philip. I'm going to let you guys go because I know you have to go play St. Patrick at a parade in Gothenburg or something. I don't know how he comes up. How does he come up with these excuses?
Philip, you better send pictures of Clonakilty sausages.
I will. There's actually a shop here. There's the only good thing Brexit did for us was there's a shop here called Little Britain. Clonakilty sausages, white pudding and black pudding, and there'll be plates of it stacked this high in Gothenburg tomorrow morning, lads. I was spamming you on WhatsApp.
It's not called Little Cork, no?
No, that's the next chain now. Well, we were going to call it that, but nobody would go there, so we called it Little Britain instead. You know, it's a
next
bit
week,
like the real thing.
They're all langers. They're all langers working there.
Next week, we're going to do our special on gout with Philip as our chief reporter. Lads, we don't have time for Dick of the Week, but I think we might just give it to our Minister for Health, just you know, because she's close to the story we just talked about. So congratulations to you, Catherine. I think her name is it?
It's a consortium Dick of the Week to everybody that fucking was involved in that process.
Yeah, totally. Enjoy St. Patrick's Day, lads. It's a great day to be Irish, bigara, bigosh, and to toe. Cushla McCree. Good luck. Take care. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back next Friday. And just keep an eye on MOTH. You can follow us we're on X, we're on Insta. You can follow us on Twitch. We're everywhere. We're like a cheap suit. We're all over it like a car bonnet. Anyway, have a great St. Patrick's Day. Enjoy the weekend, and we'll speak to you soon. Good luck.